Hello.
How's it going?
It's good.
Whew, I'm sleepy, folks. Let's see. Looks like we've got just about everybody, if not everybody. Alyssa, Alexis, James, Jenny, LeBron, Cece, Cade,
Weird. Oh well, today is.
and Randall. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Um, First thing, your song explication, your transcendental song explications are due tomorrow. And just for the record, when we get to class, I'll do attendance and everything, and then I'll just give you the whole class period to work on your song explications. Which I know most of you have at least made some headway. You know what song you're doing. You've got some ideas. What? Oh God. Ugh. Meeting. Dumb. Okay. Sorry. So today what we're going to do is read this story together. We're probably not going to talk about it much today. I mean, I might kind of, talk about it as we're reading a bit, but we'll do a bit more discussion on Thursday. So I have put this on Canvas already, and the PDF looks kind of weird just because it's like kind of old timey looking. But it came from some book that was probably published a long time ago. Um, Real quick, I just wanted to see, I know what period we're in, but I wanted to see what year this was written. 1892. So very turn of the century. Also, there are some weird and bad short films made of this story. It's an interesting one. It's one that sticks with a lot of people. I have even seen some literary memes of it because I follow a lot of literary meme accounts. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Obviously, you can look at it on your own if you want to. But here we have this old lady in a chair. There are some occasional illustrations. Does anybody want to do some reading?
Not today.
Not today. All right. In that case, let me get my water bottle because it's not a long story, but longer than like the last couple things we've read. Longer than the frog one for sure. Okay. And like I said, I'll probably stop a bit and explain things or talk about them. So pay attention. It is very seldom that mere ordinary people like John and myself secure ancestral halls for the summer, a colonial mansion, a hereditary estate, I would say a haunted house, and reach the height of romantic felicity, but that would be asking too much of fate. Still, I will proudly declare that there is something queer about it, else why should it be let so cheaply, and why have stood so long untenanted? John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in marriage. So before we start talking about John and like who this person is, clearly it's a woman, and she and her husband John are like staying in this house for the summer that's like old and kind of like it's beautiful but kind of worn down because it's old. And she's wondering like what's the deal with this house, because obviously a house this great shouldn't be so cheap. There's got to be a catch. John is practical in the extreme. He has no patience with faith, an intense horror of superstition, and he scoffs openly at any talk of things not to be felt and seen and put down in figures. John is a physician, and perhaps, I would not say it to a living soul, of course, but this is dead paper and a great relief to my mind. Perhaps that is one reason I do not get well faster. You see, he does not believe I'm sick, and what can one do? So this first page really kind of like sets up what's going on in the story. This girl is sick, this woman is sick, and her husband is a doctor, and she's even starting this story a little suspicious of him. Like maybe he's too, maybe his doctor mind doesn't really like take me at my word, which like to be honest, that's still an issue these days, like particularly with women getting doctors to believe them. In fact, I went to a couple of doctors over the summer and I was like getting my blood drawn at one point, and the nurse was like, "You're lucky that you even got this far because so many doctors just don't believe women when they say there's something wrong and they like can't really explain it." So this is very much still an issue, but especially back then, it's pretty easy to imagine her doctor husband kind of being like, "Oh, you're fine, don't worry, you're not sick." If a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there's really nothing the matter with one but a temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency, what is one to do? My brother is also a physician and also of high standing, and he says the same thing. So I take
Question.
what?
Is she gonna end up getting a lobotomy?
She is not going to end up getting a lobotomy, I promise.
Okay.
But
That's like my one pet peeve of history.
yeah, well, the way that we treated women during this time period is ridiculous. And you see up there it said a slight hysterical tendency. This is true. Back in the day, if anything was wrong with a woman, basically any kind of like mood issues, or if there wasn't anything that was like really clear that this was what was wrong, they said that it was hysteria. And what hysteria actually was, or what they thought it was a woman's uterus like floating around in the body and causing issues, which like can't happen, by the way. Like your uterus can't float. But back then they thought it could, and they were like, "Oh, well, if a woman is hysterical, there's only so many things we can do for her. We can like shut her in a room like we're doing in this story and give her like no kind of stimulation or entertainment or anything, or we could give her a lobotomy, which basically means like take out a little chunk of her brain, and maybe she'll feel better."
It wasn't
also,
taking out a
like,
chunk of the brain.
if-
What they would do is they would like lift your eyelid and stick like a very, very large nail in between it
Frontal lobe.
and up underneath your skull, and then they would like get it to where it's touching your brain, and then they would hit it with a hammer,
Yeah.
so your whole brain rattles.
Yeah, and it's meant to like disable part of your brain.
Yeah, and it's meant to like fix I can't remember the exact word. Fix rebellion. That's what it's meant to fix.
Didn't they also like, because women, like when women said they weren't like feeling too well or they think they were going crazy, didn't they like give them sexual stimulation for
Yeah,
that as well? And then that's why the vibrator was created, because doctors are tired of using their hands.
that is true.
That is nasty, and that does
is
not
like
feel
very
healthy
thing.
for
Yeah.
brain.
What was it called? Oh, yeah. If you
Best organ store I ever heard.
hysteria, then one of the treatments for it was what they called a hysterical paroxysm, which is an orgasm. So they would make you have one so that you'd feel better.
I know about half of them.
What's up with those doctors?
Yeah.
I feel like one had to be messed up.
No, a bunch of women had to have been lying about that. There's just no way that all of them just had hysteria like that. There's just, I can't.
Like hysteria is not real. It's not
It's not a real thing. But the fact that they thought it was, and then they just kept this guy. Listen.
Yeah, like it's ridiculous how people just like really treated women like a whole different creature than a man, like that our systems were not the same, which like we don't have all the same parts, but a lot of them we do. So like if a woman, I don't know, suffered from depression, which is something that everyone can suffer from, they were like, she's hysterical, give her a lobotomy. And like I'm so glad that none of us live in that time period.
Isn't that where the term Nurse Ratchet comes from as well? When they're like doing the lobotomies on people?
Maybe, I don't know actually.
Because there's a show on Netflix, and I had to ask my mom what it meant before I could watch it, and she was like, "No, don't watch it." So
Yes, actually, you're right about that. It comes from the book and movie. There was a movie of the book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which takes place in a mental hospital, and so she does give somebody a lobotomy. So I would imagine the show is kind of like a spinoff of that. All right, let's keep going. Personally, I disagree with their ideas. Personally, I believe that congenial work with excitement and change would do me good, but what is one to do? I did write for a while in spite of them, but it does exhaust me a good deal, having to be so sly about it or else meet with heavy opposition. I sometimes fancy that in my condition, if I had less opposition and more society and stimulus, but John says the very worst thing I can do is to think about my condition, and I confess it always makes me feel bad, so I'll let it alone and talk about the house. The most beautiful place. It's quite alone, standing well back from the road, quite 3 miles from the village. It makes me think of English places that you read about, where there are hedges and walls and gates that lock, and lots of separate little houses for the gardeners and people. There is a delicious garden. I never saw such a garden. Large and shady, full of box-bordered paths, and lined with long grape-covered arbors with seats under them. There were greenhouses too, but they're all broken now. There was some legal trouble, I believe, something about the heirs and co-heirs. Anyhow, the place has been empty for years. That spoils my ghostliness, I'm afraid, but I don't care. There's something strange about the house. I can feel it. I even said so to John one moonlight evening, and he said what I felt was a draft and shut the window. Like, oh, I feel like something weird is going on in this house. Nope, it's just the wind. Classic. I get unreasonably angry with John sometimes. I'm sure I never used to be so sensitive. I think it's due to this nervous condition. But John says if I feel so, I shall neglect proper self-control. So I take pains to control myself, before him at least, and that makes me very tired. I don't like our room a bit. I wanted one downstairs that opened on the piazza and had roses all over the window and such pretty old-fashioned chintz hangings, but John would not hear of it. He said there was only one window and not room for 2 beds, and no near room for him if he took another. He's very careful and loving and hardly lets me stir without special direction. I have a scheduled prescription for each hour in the day. He takes all care from me, and so I feel basically ungrateful not to value it more. Also, I just want to say, like, there's a reason that for the most part, doctors are not allowed to have their family members as patients. Like, you can't be objective. So I feel like him being in control of her health care is probably not a great idea. He said we came here solely on my account, that I was to have perfect rest and all the air I could get. Your exercise depends on your strength, my dear, said he, and your food somewhat on your appetite, but air you can absorb all the time. So we took a nursery at the top of the house. It's a big, airy room, the whole floor nearly, with windows that look all ways and air and sunshine galore. It was nursery first, and then playroom and gymnasium, I should judge, for the windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the walls. The paint and paper look as if a boys' school had used it. It's stripped off, the paper, in great patches all around the head of my bed, about as far as I can reach, and in a great place on the other side of the room, low down. I never saw a worse paper in my life. One of those sprawling, flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. It's dull enough to confuse the eye and following, pronounced enough to constantly irritate and provoke study. And when you follow the lame, uncertain curves for a little distance, they suddenly commit suicide, plunge off at outrageous angles, destroy themselves in unheard of contradictions. It's very upsetting wallpaper, which is kind of one of those things where, like, you know, if you look at something long enough, you can see a face in it. That's common. I feel like she's kind of doing that. She's just like seeing things in the wallpaper, and like, since she doesn't have anything else to do but stare at the wallpaper all the time, she's noticing patterns or like creating things. The color is repellent, almost revolting, a smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow turning sunlight. It is a dull yet lurid orange in some places, a sickly sulfur tint in others. No wonder the children hated it. I should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. There comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. So she's you can kind of see where the assignment from yesterday is coming up here. She's sort of writing this story as a diary. And just to give you a little bit of background, the person who wrote this, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, she wrote it after having basically experienced it. She had a similar condition, which we'll learn more about what is exactly wrong with this person. But she had a similar condition and was put on rest cure, meaning she was just shut away and like had no kind of stimulation or anything. And she was like, this is messed up. This is not how you're supposed to treat people. This didn't make me any better. And so to kind of shine a light on that issue, she wrote this, and it really did like garner a lot of attention. And this story is honestly like one of the reasons that people came to sort of realize that this kind of thing doesn't work. This doesn't make women better. So way to go, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. We have been here 2 weeks, time jump, and I haven't felt like writing before since that first day. I'm sitting by the window now up in this atrocious nursery, and there's nothing to hinder my writing as much as I please, save lack of strength. John is away all day, and even some nights when his cases are serious. I'm glad my case is not serious, but these nervous troubles are dreadfully depressing. John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there's no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. That kind of makes me think of like when people who suffer from depression are told, cheer up, there's nothing to be depressed about. It's like, that doesn't do any good. That's like, there's actually something physically wrong with me, and you telling me to cheer up doesn't make it any better. And that's kind of John's attitude. Like, there isn't any reason for you to feel bad, so you shouldn't feel bad. Of course, it is only nervousness. It does not weigh on me, so not to do my duty in any way. I meant to be such a help to John, such a real rest and comfort, and here I am, a comparative burden already. Nobody would believe what an effort it is to do what little I'm able to dress and entertain and other things. It's fortunate Mary's so good with the baby, such a dear baby, and yet I cannot be with him. It makes me so nervous. So this is kind of a big-ish reveal. She's got a baby, and clearly this person, Mary, who's probably like a nanny or like some sort of helper, is taking care of this baby for her. And she says it makes me so nervous to be with the baby. What possible diagnosis do you think this might kind of point to? Any ideas? If she's got a new baby and is nervous to be around him or her. Ever heard of postpartum depression?
That's the depression you get after you have a baby.
Yeah, so she's got this new baby.
So LeBron, it's like when a woman has a baby, her hormones are all out of whack. They're all out of whack during the whole pregnancy. But when she has the baby, she can sometimes go through postpartum depression, which is just depression, but after the baby. It doesn't last a long time, or sometimes it does. It really depends on who you are. My mom has it, and my grandma has it too. But that's just long-lasting effects of depression through genetics. But we're not going to talk about that. The point is that it happens to all women, and not all, but most women, it happens to them. It's just after they have a baby.
And like to some degree, and some people have it really mild, like they just are kind of like they just don't immediately feel back to their normal selves after they have a baby. And sometimes it's really bad where like they want to harm the baby because of it, and it's not like they're not.
It also can
just postpartum depression.
It can also contribute to weight gain and other mental issues as well as that, and it can change your genetic makeup partially, mostly forever, but not all the time. Just depends.
Yeah. So
that sounds like a nightmare.
It does, yeah. And I don't know like all the symptoms associated with it, but if it's postpartum depression, she would show a lot of these symptoms that people back then would have seen as like hysteria, like mood instability, depression, like crying a lot, all these things they would just kind of chalk up to hysteria. I'm not sure when postpartum depression was like officially declared as being a thing, but probably after this, I would say. I suppose John never was nervous in his life. He laughs at me so much about this wallpaper. At first he meant to repaper the room, but afterwards he said that I was letting it get the better of me, and that nothing was worse for a nervous patient than to give way to such fancies. He said that after the wallpaper was changed, it would be the heavy bedstead, and then the barred windows, and then the gate at the head of the stairs, and so on. You know the place is doing you good, he said, and really, dear, I don't care to renovate the house just for a 3 months rental. Then do let us go downstairs, I said. There's such pretty rooms there. Then he took me in his arms and called me a blessed little goose and said he would go down cellar if I wished and have it whitewashed into the bargain. I hate John. He's so condescending. But he's right enough about the beds and windows and things. It is an airy and comfortable room as anyone need wish, and of course I would not be so silly as to make him uncomfortable just for a whim. I'm really getting fond of the big room, all but that horrid paper. Out of one window, I can see the garden, those mysterious deep shaded arbors, the riotous old fashioned flowers and bushes and gnarly trees. Out of another, I get a lovely view of the bay and a little private wharf belonging to the estate. There's a beautiful shaded lane that runs down there from the house. I always fancy I see people walking in these numerous paths and arbors, but John has cautioned me not to give way to fancy in the least. He says that with my imaginative power and habits of story making, a nervous weakness like mine is sure to lead to all manner of excited fancies, and that I ought to use my will and good sense to check the tendency. So I try. I think sometimes that if I were only well enough to write a little, it would relieve the press of ideas and rest me. But I find I get pretty tired when I try. It is so discouraging not to have any advice and companionship about my work. When I get really well, John says we'll ask cousin Henry and Julia down for a long visit. But he says he would as soon put fireworks in my pillowcase as to let me have those stimulating people about now. I wish I could get well faster, but I must not think about that. This paper looks to me as if it knew what a vicious influence it had. There's a recurrent spot where the pattern lolls like a broken neck and two bulbous eyes stare at you upside down. Makes me think of The Haunting of Hill House. I get positively angry with the impertinence of it and the everlastingness. Up and down and sideways they crawl, and those absurd, unblinking eyes are everywhere. There's one place where two breaths didn't match, I mean like two panels of the wallpaper, they don't line up. And the eyes go all up and down the line, one a little higher than the other. I never saw so much expression in an inanimate thing before, and we all know how much expression they have. I used to lie awake as a child and get more entertainment and terror out of blank walls and plain furniture than most children could find in a toy store. Again, that's like, when there are even like Instagram accounts dedicated to this, like faces and things, when you just like stare at something for a long time until you notice it looking like a face. So she's like, I've always had this kind of imagination that allows me to see stuff like that. And now that I don't have anything else to do, it's really kind of getting the better of me. I remember what a kindly wink the knobs of our big old bureau used to have, and there was one chair that always seemed like a strong friend. I used to feel that if any of the other things looked too fierce, I could always hop into that chair and be safe. The furniture in this room is no worse than inharmonious, however, for we had to bring it all from downstairs. I suppose when this was used as a playroom, they had to take the nursery things out, and no wonder I never saw such ravages as the children have made here. The wallpaper, as I said before, is torn off in spots, and it sticketh closer than a brother. They must have had perseverance as well as hatred. Then the floor is scratched and gouged and splintered. The plaster itself is dug out here and there, and this great heavy bed, which is all we found in the room, looks as if it had been through the wars. But I don't mind it a bit, only the paper. I don't know why there's a quotation mark there. That's not a quote. There comes John's sister, such a dear girl as she is, and so careful of me. I must not let her find me writing. She's a perfect and enthusiastic housekeeper and hopes for no better profession. I verily believe she thinks it is the writing which made me sick. But I can write when she is out and see her a long way off from these windows. There's one that commands the road, a lovely shaded winding road, and one that just looks off over the country. A lovely country too, full of great elms and velvet meadows. This wallpaper has a kind of sub-pattern in a different shade, a particularly irritating one, for you can only see it in certain lights and not clearly then. But in the places where it isn't faded and where the sun is just so, I can see a strange, provoking, formless sort of figure that seems to skulk about behind that silly and conspicuous front design. There's sister on the stairs. So she'll go back and forth and like talk about other things and about how like what the house looks like and what the people did to it who were here before, but she always comes back to this wallpaper, and sometimes kind of abruptly, which I think kind of shows her state of mind, that like this is a really preoccupying thing for her. And it's kind of creepy the way that she describes it, as like some sort of form or figure lurking behind the main design. It's weird. Well, the 4th of July is over. The people are all gone and I am tired out. John thought it might do me good to see a little company, so we just had Mother and Nellie and the children down for a week. Of course, I didn't do a thing. Jenny sees to everything now. Jenny is probably like a maid or a housekeeper or something. There's several times in here where like characters are not fully described and it can be a little confusing, especially at the end. But it tired me all the same. John says if I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Weir Mitchell in the fall. And Weir Mitchell was a real doctor, and he was the real doctor that made this author go on bed rest. So she was really calling him out by like putting him in her story. If it wasn't Weir Mitchell, the name was similar enough, like his real name was similar enough to where everybody knew what she was talking about. But I don't want to go there at all. I had a friend who was in his hands once, and she says he's just like John and my brother, only more so. Besides, it's such an undertaking to go so far. I don't feel as if it was worthwhile to turn my hand over for anything, and I'm getting dreadfully fretful and querulous. I cry at nothing and cry most of the time. Of course, I don't when John is here or anybody else, but when I'm alone. And I'm alone a good deal just now. John is kept in town very often by serious cases, and Jenny is good and lets me alone when I want her to. So I walk a little in the garden or down that lovely lane, sit in the porch under the roses, and lie down up here a good deal. I'm getting really fond of the room in spite of the wallpaper. Perhaps because of the wallpaper. It dwells in my mind so. I lie here on this great immovable bed. It is nailed, scare me to death, nailed down, I believe, and follow that pattern about by the hour. It is good as gymnastics, I assure you. I start, we'll say, at the bottom, down in the corner over there, where it has not been touched, and I determine for the 1000th time that I will follow that pointless pattern to some sort of conclusion. I know a little of the principle of design, and I know this thing was not arranged on any laws of radiation or alternation or repetition or symmetry or anything else that I ever heard of. It's repeated, of course, by the breadths, but not otherwise. Looked at in one way, each breadth stands alone. The bloated curves and flourishes, a kind of debased Romanesque with delirium tremens, don't know what that is, go waddling up and down in isolated columns of fatuity. But on the other hand, they connect diagonally, and the sprawling outlines run off in great slanting waves of optic horror, like a lot of wallowing seaweeds in full chase. The whole thing goes horizontally too, at least it seems so, and I exhaust myself in trying to distinguish the order of its going in that direction. They've used a horizontal breadth for a frieze, and that adds wonderfully to the confusion. And a frieze is like a picture that goes around the room that's like painted on all the walls, but continuously. There's one end of the room where it's almost intact, and there, when the cross lights fade and the low sun shines directly upon it, I can almost fancy radiation after all. The interminable grotesque seems to form around a common center and rush off in headlong plunges of equal distraction. It makes me tired to follow it. We'll take a nap, I guess. I don't know why I should write this. I don't want to, I don't feel able, and I know John would think it absurd, but I must say what I feel and think in some way. It's such a relief. But the effort is getting to be greater than the relief. Half the time now, I'm awfully lazy and lie down ever so much. John says I mustn't lose my strength and has me take cod liver oil, and lots of tonics and things, to say nothing of ale and wine and rare meat, which was also part of the cure. Like, you're eating all these super rich foods, like eating rare meat, drinking wine and ale, which would be like beer. In fact, I remember one time seeing this movie where like a woman had some kind of health problem, and the doctor was like, give her plenty of sun and make sure that she gets lots of cream and butter. I'm like, that sounds kind of awesome, but I don't know if it's gonna help.
Wait, hold up. It will help her emotionally.
It
Or
was
cream and butter.
You're right. You're absolutely right. That's why, like, I'll give myself a little bit of license sometimes if I'm eating too many sweets or like too many rich foods. I'm like, it's what the doctor would order. It's fine. Dear John, he loves me very dearly and hates to have me sick. I tried to have a real, earnest, reasonable talk with him the other day and tell him how I wish he would let me go and make a visit to cousin Henry and Julia. But he said I wasn't able to go, nor able to stand it after I got there, and I did not make out a very good case for myself, for I was crying before I had finished. Like, of course you were. You have some kind of mood issue. You have postpartum depression or something. You're going to be crying all the time. It's getting to be a great effort for me to think straight. Just this nervous weakness, I suppose. And dear John gathered me up in his arms and just carried me upstairs and laid me on the bed and sat by me and read to me till it tired my head. He said I was his darling and his comfort and all he had, and that I must take care of myself for his sake and keep well. He says no one but myself can help me out of it, and that I must use my will and self-control and not let any silly fancies run away with me. It kind of sounds more to me like he treats her like a child than a wife. Like he literally carries her up the stairs and he's always like, you silly little goose, don't let your imagination run away with you. And just saying kinds of stuff that's really like condescending. And yeah, he's trying to take care of her, but it seems more fatherly than husbandly.
Give me an example of husbandly, because also you gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do, but like he's not listening to her at all. He's just like kind of patting her on the head and telling her what to do. And I feel like husbandly, which is, I don't think that's a word, but I'm using it anyway, is just more of like seeing somebody as an equal and paying attention to their opinions and like listening to them when they talk to you. And he's just not doing that. He's like, oh, I know best, it's fine. There's one comfort. The baby is well and happy and does not have to occupy this nursery with the horrid wallpaper. If we had not used it, that blessed child would have. What a fortunate escape. Why, I wouldn't have a child of mine, an impressionable little thing, live in such a room for worlds. I never thought of it before, but it's lucky that John kept me here after all. I can stand it so much easier than a baby, you see. Of course, I never mention it to them anymore. I'm too wise, but I keep watch of it all the same. There are things in that paper that nobody knows but me or ever will. Behind the outside pattern, the dim shapes get clearer every day. It's always the same shape, only very numerous, and it is like a woman stooping down and creeping about behind that pattern. I don't like it a bit. I begin to think, I wish John would take me away from here. It's so hard to talk with John about my case because he's so wise and because he loves me so, but I tried it last night. It was moonlight, the moon shines in all around just as the sun does. I hate to see it sometimes. It creeps so slowly and always comes in by one window or another. John was asleep and I hated to waken him, so I kept still and watched the moonlight on that undulating wallpaper till I felt creepy. The faint figure behind seemed to shake the pattern just as if she wanted to get out. I got up softly and went to feel and see if the paper did move, and when I came back, John was awake. What is it, little girl? He said. Don't go walking about like that. You'll get cold. I thought it was a good time to talk, so I told him that I really was not gaining here, and that I wish he would take me away. Why, darling, said he, our lease will be up in 3 weeks, and I can't see how to leave before. The repairs are not done at home, and I cannot possibly leave town just now. Of course, if you were in any danger, I could and would, but you really are better, dear, whether you can see it or not. I'm a doctor, dear, and I know. You are gaining flesh and color, your appetite is better, and I feel really much easier about you. I don't weigh a bit more, said I, nor as much, and my appetite may be better in the evening when you're here, but it's worse in the morning when you're away. Bless her little heart, said he with a big hug. She shall be as sick as she pleases. But now let's improve the shining hours by going to sleep and talk about it in the morning. And you won't go away? I asked gloomily. Why, how can I, dear? It's only 3 weeks more, and then we'll take a nice little trip of a few days while Jenny is getting the house ready. Really, dear, you are better. Better in body, perhaps, I began, and stopped short, for he sat up straight and looked at me with such a stern, reproachful look that I could not say another word. My darling, said he, I beg of you for my sake and for our child's sake, as well as for your own, that you will never for one instant let that idea enter your mind. There's nothing so dangerous, so fascinating to a temperament like yours. It's a false and foolish fancy. Can you not trust me as a physician when I tell you so? So again, he's being really like overbearing and not listening to her. She's like, I'm not better. Like maybe my appetite's increased some, but not all the time. I haven't gained any weight. I haven't done any of the things that we came here to do. I feel bad. Like I don't feel like myself. And she starts to say like maybe I'm better in body but not in mind or not in spirit. And he's just like, don't even go there. Don't even say that. So of course I said no more on that score and we went to sleep before long. He thought I was asleep first, but I wasn't, and lay there for hours trying to decide whether that front pattern and the back pattern really did move together or separately. On a pattern like this by daylight, there's a lack of sequence, a defiance of law that's a constant irritant to a normal mind. The color is hideous enough and unreliable enough and infuriating enough, but the pattern is torturing. You think you've mastered it, but just as you get well underway in following, it turns a back somersault, and there you are. It slaps you in the face, knocks you down, and tramples upon you. It is like a bad dream. It's very intense for a wallpaper. The outside pattern is a florid arabesque reminding one of a fungus. If you can imagine a toadstool in joints, an interminable string of toadstools budding and sprouting in endless convolutions, why, that is something like it. That is sometimes. There is one marked peculiarity about this paper, a thing nobody seems to notice but myself, and that is that it changes as the light changes. When the sun shoots in through the east window, I always watch for that first long straight ray. It changes so quickly that I never can quite believe it. That's why I watch it always. By moonlight, the moon shines in all night when there's a moon. I wouldn't know it was the same paper. At night, in any kind of light, in twilight, candlelight, lamplight, and worst of all, by moonlight, it becomes bars. The outside pattern, I mean, and the woman behind it is as plain as can be. I want to stop and talk about it, but I want to get through it. I didn't
talk.
Well, and we'll talk about this more on Thursday because I'll, obviously I'm going to give you guys the whole time tomorrow to work on your transcendental paper. But I think there's probably some kind of connection to the fact that she is a woman stuck in a room with bars on her window, and what she's seeing on the paper is a woman trapped behind bars. I don't feel like that's coincidental. I didn't realize for a long time what the thing was that showed behind that dim sub pattern, but now I'm quite sure it's a woman. By daylight, she is subdued, quiet. I fancy it's the pattern that keeps her so still. It's so puzzling and keeps me quiet by the hour. I lie down ever so much now. John says it's good for me and to sleep all I can. Indeed, he started the habit by making me lie down for an hour after each meal. It's actually really not good for you to lie down after a meal. It's a very bad habit.
Why? Why is that not good?
Because it helps it like slows digestion, and it can, over time that can contribute to like clogged arteries and heart issues.
Oh my gosh.
I know, because it's so nice to lay down after you eat. Like it's
That explains so much from my case.
But yeah, you're not supposed to lie down right after you take a nap, or lie down right after you eat a meal.
Wait, so how long are you supposed to wait?
What, Cece?
How long are you supposed to wait?
I don't know actually. I'll look into it. I remember this comedian I listened to had a bit about that, about how like that was bad for you, and he's like, I'm already lying down when I eat. Like I just eat in bed. I'm probably gonna die when I'm 40, but it's comfortable. I just want to be comfortable. It is a very bad habit, I'm convinced, for you see, I don't sleep. And that cultivates deceit, for I don't tell them I'm awake. Oh no, the fact is, I'm getting a little afraid of John. He seems very queer sometimes, and even Jenny has an inexplicable look. It strikes me occasionally just as a scientific hypothesis that perhaps it is the paper. I've watched John when he did not know I was looking and come into the room suddenly on the most innocent excuses, and I've caught him several times looking at the paper. And Jenny too. I caught Jenny with her hand on it once. She didn't know I was in the room, and when I asked her in a very quiet voice with the most restrained manner possible, what she was doing with the paper. She turned around as if she'd been caught stealing and looked quite angry, asked me why I should frighten her so. Then she said that the paper stained everything it touched, that she had found yellow smooches on all my clothes and John's, and she wished we would be more careful. Did that sound innocent? But I know she was studying that pattern, and I'm determined that nobody shall find it out but myself. Like there's a puzzle to solve or something. Like she's got to figure this out. Like there's not really anything figured out. Okay, I got to be conscious of time because the bells are not right and they're off by like 2 minutes. It's really annoying. Life is very much more exciting now than it used to be. You see, I have something more to expect, to look forward to watch. I really do eat better and am more quiet than I was. John is so pleased to see me improve. He laughed a little the other day and said I seem to be flourishing in spite of my wallpaper. I turned it off with a laugh. I had no intention of telling him it was because of the wallpaper. He would make fun of me. He might even want to take me away. I don't want to leave now until I found it out. There's a week more, and I think that will be enough. I'm feeling ever so much better. I don't sleep much at night, for it is so interesting to watch developments, but I sleep a good deal in the daytime. It's so interesting to sit around and watch wallpaper for hours after hours after hours. In the daytime, it's tiresome and perplexing. There are always new shoots on the fungus and new shades of yellow all over it. I cannot keep count of them, though I've tried conscientiously. It is the strangest yellow, that wallpaper. It makes me think of all the yellow things I ever saw. Not beautiful ones like buttercups, but old, foul, bad yellow things. There's something else about that paper, the smell. I noticed it the moment we came into the room, but with so much air and sun, it was not bad. Now we've had a week of fog and rain, and whether the windows are open or not, the smell is here. It creeps all over the house. I find it hovering in the dining room, skulking in the parlor, hiding in the hall, lying in wait for me on the stairs. It gets into my hair. Even when I go to ride, if I turn my head suddenly and surprise it, there's that smell. Such a peculiar odor, too. I've spent hours in trying to analyze it, to find what it smelled like. It's not bad at first and very gentle, but quite the subtlest, most enduring odor I ever met. In this damp weather, it's awful. I wake up in the night and find it hanging over me. It used to disturb me at first. I thought seriously of burning the house to reach the smell. Logical. But now I'm used to it. The only thing I can think of that it is like is the color of the paper, a yellow smell. There's a very funny mark on this wall low down near the mopboard, a streak that runs around the room. It goes behind every piece of furniture except the bed, a long, straight, even smooch, as if it had been rubbed over and over. I wonder how it was done and who did it and what they did it for. Round and round and round, round and round and round. It makes me dizzy. I really have discovered something at last. Through watching so much at night, when it changes so, I finally found out. The front pattern does move, and no wonder the woman behind shakes it. Sometimes I think there are a great many women behind, and sometimes only one, and she crawls around fast, and her crawling shakes it all over. Then in the very bright spots, she keeps still, and in the very shady spots, she just takes hold of the bars and shakes them hard. And she's all the time trying to climb through. But nobody could climb through that pattern. It strangles so. I think that's why it has so many heads. They get through and then the pattern strangles them off and turns them upside down and makes their eyes white. If those heads were covered or taken off, it would not be half so bad. That's actually really creepy imagery, like these heads being stuck through bars and then strangled off until their eyes turn white. That's gross. That's pretty creepy.
I don't know. Doesn't sound so bad.
It sounds like it would be at home in a horror movie.
Fair
Okay.
enough.
I'm gonna read this next little section like until the stars, and then I'll finish it on Thursday because the bell's gonna ring. We won't have time to finish it, and I'd rather stop at like a good stopping point. Okay. I think that woman gets out in the daytime. The woman behind the wallpaper. She gets out of the wallpaper. And I'll tell you why privately. I've seen her. I can see her out of every one of my windows. It's the same woman I know, for she is always creeping, and most women do not creep by daylight. I see her in that long shaded lane creeping up and down. I see her in those dark grape arbors creeping all around the garden. I see her on that long road under the trees creeping along, and when a carriage comes, She hides under the blackberry vines. I don't blame her a bit. It must be very humiliating to be caught creeping by daylight. I always lock the door when I creep by daylight. I think it says most women do not creep by daylight, but this woman does, and I do. I always lock the door when I creep by daylight. I can't do it at night, for I know John would suspect something at once. And John is so queer now that I don't want to irritate him. I wish he would take another room. Besides, I don't want anybody to get that woman out at night but myself. I often wonder if I could see her out of all the windows at once. But turn as fast as I can only see out of one at a time. And though I always see her, she may be able to creep faster than I can turn. I've watched her sometimes away off in the open country, creeping as fast as a cloud shadow in a high wind. That's where I'm gonna stop. I'll pick it up on Thursday, and then we'll talk about it. I might have to like switch around a couple of plans for Thursday and Friday, but it's fine. We'll get to it all eventually. So you know, on the surface, at least, it definitely seems like the longer she stays here, I don't want to say the crazier she gets, but I mean, she is seeing things in the wallpaper, not only seeing things, but being like really dedicated to watching it, and then kind of creating these ideas for like what's going on. Like there's a woman in the wallpaper and she has to get her out. There might be some, like, that's what's happening on the surface. That's what she's thinking about. But there might be some more subtext that we can get into after we have finished the story and see how it all plays out. So the bell is going to ring in just a minute because it's early. But tomorrow, don't forget, I'll remind you when we get to class, but once we do attendance and everything, I'm just going to let you guys work on your song explication. So that's all for today. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Miss McCall, wait, hold up before we leave. I have a question about missing assignments.
Okay.
If you're missing assignment, how long do we have so we can turn it in so we can get an actual grade?
You have a week after the due date. Are you missing anything?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
It was that poetry assignment. I thought I turned it in.
I just heard Dominic yell, LeBron.
Oh, hey, Dominic.
Where's LeBron?
This is him.
Show your face, LeBron. Hey, LeBron!
I'm doing no see.
Yeah, I know, right? You got a haircut, LeBron. You don't have that afro anymore.
I need to get another haircut. I'm gonna grow an afro again.
You don't enter the army until 2 years, LeBron, and grow it out.
I'm going to the Navy. Also, they're gonna shave my head anyway.
I know, but like, let it grow out.
Until then.
And yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, it's just the nature writing. That's the assignment I'm missing. I forgot to turn that in.
Okay, you can go ahead and turn that in then.
Okay.
All right, see you guys tomorrow.
Be the sun.